Ladies and gentlemen, in the wine history sessions, that workshop that we had before the conference, I made the point that the South African wine industry has always been very, very dependent on the export market for its progress. And the reason for that is because the domestic market is relatively small. It was historically, and it still is today. Obviously the industry itself is interested in trying to increase consumption in the domestic market, and I think for a couple of reasons, one of which is the fact that the African market is growing in importance to the industry for a variety of reasons. And we know that we can't really succeed in a market like that unless we can succeed in our own domestic market. What makes it more difficult, or probably in one sense a little bit easier, but in generally what makes it more difficult is that you have this very, very rapidly changing demographics. So it's very difficult to keep up with demand in different segments of the market. And if I can just sort of summarize the main characteristics of the demographics, I mean, we have a massively rapidly urbanizing population, which is going to move from around about where it is now at about 2/3 urbanized up until 3/4 within the next 20 to 25 years. And it's not very long ago that it was under 50%. So that's a big change. Traditionally, we've understood poverty to be mainly a rural issue. That doesn't seem to be the case because a lot of the urbanization goes with poverty. And one can obviously, you can measure poverty in different ways, but in this case it's a sort of a point of a case of people without disposable income. In other words, they don't have the money to buy luxuries like wine. So that's another problem which needs attention. And then of course income inequality, which traditionally has been between population groups, essentially between the white population and the rest of the country. Our overall income inequality has been increasing, but the income inequality between white and black has not. It's actually gone down quite considerably. So what has happened is inequality within population groups has increased very rapidly. And again, all of this affects the sort of number of people, the potential market that one is talking about, and it affects the way in which one will try and approach markets like that. In the study that I'm talking about now is a master's student of mine she's a Belgian girl. Her family is involved in importing South African wine into the Belgian market, and she's joined the business, which is why she couldn't be here today. She said she actually has to work for a living and not go to conferences. But anyway, so what we've done here is look at a very specific demographic. We did not try and be representative of any demographic in South Africa. So what you have here is some very, very particular, or very focused work. And the first focus is the fact that we're looking at Pinotage wines exclusively. And secondly, it was Generation Y. And it was amongst students and young staff members at Stellenbosch University, where I'm based. In other words, it's the relatively affluent end of the market who have disposable income. We're hoping to start being able to replicate this kind of thing in different demographic segments over time. And it won't only be for Pinotage, it will be for different wines as well. But so this was a start really just to see whether we can do something like this and whether we can get the results out of it that are interesting. So what we did was, or what she did was take over 100 observations, 100 people, right? And took them through these flights of Pinotage. The first round was a completely blind tasting, and they were given at random. They were given these seven wines, a very wide variety of quality of prices, and from different parts of the industry geographically, etc., etc. So it's a sort of a random selection of wines. The most interesting result that came out of it is something which is, I think, fairly sort of established in the literature, is that when you're talking about novice wine drinkers, they will almost invariably prefer the cheaper wine, and this was the case here as well. So you know people for some reason or other they choose the cheaper wine. Then in the second round, and this was in a tasting session, it was the same people who were tasting the first round, which was blind tasting. In the second round, we gave them some information about the wines that they were drinking. What we did not tell them is that the wines that they were now drinking were exactly the same as the ones that were on the. So they didn't know that they were the same wines. They did know in both cases that they were Pinotage wines, but they didn't know that what they were doing is a sort of succession on the first tasting. And with each one of the wines, we gave them some information, and information is up on the board there. And you can see that in the second last column, the idea was a very positive message would be 2 pluses, and then a very negative message is 2 minuses, and then the last one is a sort of ambivalent message, a bit of both. And looked at how this influenced people's liking of the wines. And this is where it started getting interesting, because the more expensive wines, the liking went up as soon as you told people something positive about the wine. It made no difference to the cheaper wines. So although people preferred, in blind tasting, they preferred a cheaper wine, once they learned something about the wine, it sort of neutralized out. It did nothing to the... and whether this is brand stigma or regional stigma or whatever, we don't really know. It's something that would want to follow up. But certainly the positive message had a material impact on whether people liked the more expensive wines. In other words, the ones that they didn't like that much in the first round. Right. In the third round, what we did was again the same wines, and then we gave them everything. It was a non-blind tasting. In other words, they could see the label, they could see the packaging, and they could see the whole lot. And basically those results were then reinforced. They reinforced the second round results, and nothing much new came out of it. What we did find, because the analysis was also sort of done on a gender basis, was that women are more susceptible to this message of what comes out of the brand. But again, whether this is because they are more careful in their first assessment, or whether they just are more gullible, is a different issue. And if you remember, this is a very particular group of people, so I'm not being gender insensitive. Well, I am, but I mean, I'm not trying to generalize too much here. It's a very particular group of people that we're talking about. And so in the gender sense, there was a very distinct differentiation in the results. There was we tried to look at whether there was a difference in the sort of younger part of that population segment or in the older part. And remember, this is a relatively tight age group that we're talking about, Generation Y. But that didn't seem to make any difference. So as I said, I felt it was an experiment that worked, and this is something that we'd want to follow up with different kinds of demographics and see whether we can come up with any kind of consistency in the results, which would enable one to stitch together markets that are a little bit bigger than this very bifurcated and very fragmented market that we have. In South Africa, and a market which, to sort of to get back to where I started off, a market which is not growing in terms of domestic consumption. In South Africa, we sold around about 350 million liters of wine 25 years ago in the domestic market, and it's fluctuated so up and down by maybe 20 million liters, but it's back to 350 million liters again, and so per capita consumption has declined quite substantially. And what has increased have been the ready-to-drinks, which have gone from 50 million to 450 million liters. So very definite sort of signals of taste that are coming out of that. Okay, thank you very much.